Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Mr. American's Moments in History, U.S. History Edition. Today, in keeping with the theme that we've kind of been working on the last few videos, I've created a video to kind of help my students kind of dive a little bit deeper into this concept that we've been talking about in class called yellow journalism, where you're sort of using these sensationalized stories with, these very dramatic, titles. You're trying to get, people to buy the newspapers. You're trying to get people's attention. So we talked a little bit about the explosion of the U.S.S. Maine after it had been sent to Havana. Remember, the Maine sinks on February 15th of 1898. That's a really important detail to kind of help you understand, because a lot of these are written, in fact, both articles you're going to see are written only a couple of days afterwards, February 17th of 1898. Again, February 17th of 1898. So we're only talking 2 days after the explosion of the Maine. It's hard to know exactly what happened after only 2 days, especially in a time period where you're trying to move workers and divers down to do more exploration into figuring out what happened. So where we're going to be looking at, again, how long after the explosion, kind of already gave you that one, but we're only talking about just 2 days. But we're going to look at headlines. We're going to look at evidence today. We're going to read 2 articles. One's going to be from the New York Journal. It's going to be a very classic example of yellow journalism, very sensationalized. And then the New York Times, one that takes a much different approach to this particular situation. And what I'm going to ask you to do is think about these questions. So, again, we said it's only 2 days after it was written. And in both, I want you to look at the headlines, and based on that headline, what is it saying happened? What's the point of view of what happened? Especially in the New York Journal, too, what type of evidence are you seeing? Again, the New York Times, what sort of evidence are you seeing? You're going to hear a lot from different naval officials, and in some cases, from reporters. So what your job is going to be after you kind of collect some of that information, publication date, to kind of help you fill in the chart, according to the article, again, journal being A, Times being B, you're going to then build what information is included to support their version of the story, what's their evidence, okay, you're going to write that in here, and then lastly, which newspaper uses strong evidence, and explain why. Okay. So those are the things I want you to pull out as we read, and we'll highlight a couple of things as we read too. But these are the sort of things I'm going to ask my students to kind of think about as we get started. So the first thing I always tell my students is always source. And again, this has been given to us by the Stanford History Education Group, or SHEG, which is now DIG, or the Digital Inquiry Group. They do awesome stuff. And again, if any teachers happen to be listening, please check these guys out. They do a fantastic job, especially with primary sources. So document A, like I said, is from the New York Journal, has been modified. But we always start with our sourcing. Our sourcing in this case is kind of the same on top and bottom. So we'll just kind of primarily look at the top because they give us more detail on the top too. It says the following is an excerpt, a small portion, from the New York Journal and Advertiser. That's its whole name. So it's not 2 newspapers. It's all in one. And this was published February 17th, 1898. Again, 2 days after the explosion of the Maine. It was purchased by William Randolph Hearst in 1895. So again, he's the one who we talked about who kind of helps pioneer this idea of yellow journalism. The journal was published a lot of investigative and human interest stories that used, again, highly emotional writing style and included banner headlines and graphic images. Again, trying to get eyeballs on the newspaper, wanting people to buy. So here's your headline. So based on the headline, what happened here? It says, destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. You can see already blame is being placed. They're already telling you what their opinion's going to be. And it's, again, already telling you like, hey, this was an enemy. This was done intentionally. And again, it uses that sensationalism. We know that there was already tension in Cuba with the Spanish and the United States, but again, uses that sensationalism to get your attention. And then it continues. Assistant Secretary Roosevelt, in this case Teddy Roosevelt, or Theodore Roosevelt, convinced that the explosion of the warship was not an accident. Again, going to be one of their big sources. The journal offers $50,000 reward for the conviction of the criminals who sent 258 American sailors to their death. Now, that is based in truth, but again, conviction of the criminals. They're choosing very specific words, trying to drum up emotion. Naval officers all agree that the ship was destroyed on purpose. They're making a really big assumption here with that. Again, probably stretching the truth on that one. Naval officers think the Maine was destroyed by a Spanish mine. So again, already 2 days and we've already got that report. That's making some big assumptions. But again, trying to sell papers. All right, digging a little bit more into the article itself. George Bryson, the journal's special reporter at Havana, writes that it is the secret opinion. So again, it's a secret? Then why is it in the paper, right? Of many people in Havana that the warship Maine was destroyed by a mine and 258 men were killed on purpose by the Spanish. So again, not waiting any time to already assume that this was not an accident, it was done on purpose. This is the opinion of several American naval authorities. Again, very intentional language there. The Spaniards, it is believed, arranged to have the Maine drop anchor over a harbor mine. Wires connected to the mine to the magazine of the ship. By the way, the magazine is where like the artillery and weapons are being stored on a ship. So highly explosive. Continuing. Wires connected to the mine to the magazine of the ship. If this is true, the brutal nature of the Spaniards will be shown by the fact that they waited to explode the mine until all the men had gone to sleep. I wonder how they got that detail, huh? Spanish officials are protesting too much that they did not do it. Our government has ordered an investigation. That one's certainly in truth. This newspaper has sent divers to Havana to report on the condition of the wreckage. The newspaper is also offering a $50,000 reward for exclusive evidence that will convict whoever is responsible. Again, trying to stir up like, hey, we want the truth here. Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt says he is convinced that the destruction of the Maine in Havana Harbor was not an accident. How would he know after 2 days, right? If they're still doing their investigation. The suspicion that the Maine was purposely blown up grows stronger every hour. Not a single fact to the contrary has been produced. Again, you see throughout here they speak in definitives. Like, there's no other evidence. Everyone thinks it wasn't an accident. It's hard to know that after 2 days of investigating. They don't have all the answers yet. So, certainly, again, you see several examples of that sensationalism, that stretching of the truth to sort of, again, get you interested, because remember, they want to sell papers. Let's contrast this with document B, the New York Times. Okay, so again, the first thing we always do with documents is we source them, right? What are we looking at? What biases are maybe they going to bring with it? Now, again, just like up here and down here, sourcing gives us the same information, so we're actually going to read from the top because they give us a little bit more information here. So this is, again, a portion or an excerpt from the New York Times, published the same day, February 17th, 1898. This one was established in 1851, and the New York Times provided investigative coverage of local New York issues and events, as well as national and international news. Now, as you listen to this title, really take a moment and compare and contrast it with the one from the journal. So the title of the New York Times article reads, Maine's Hull Will Decide. Okay. Definitely doesn't get your attention as much as the work of an enemy, and mentioning words like destruction. But they both tell you what the story is going to be about. It's going to be about the Maine. Divers will inspect the ship's hull. This is the under portion of the ship, to find out whether the explosion was from the outside or the inside. That would be a really huge detail. It'd be hard to explode from the inside if it was done by the Spanish. Magazines of warships sometimes blow up because of too much heat inside. Hard to blow up the magazine from the outside. So stand corrected there. Certainly in this case, a lot of protection, a lot of metal on the inside. So the idea if it's going to blow up from the inside would suggest it was probably an accident. All right, this article continues. It has been a busy day for the Navy Department. The warship Maine was destroyed in Havana Harbor last night. Officials in Washington and Havana have been sending cables all night. So again, the idea is that they're saying, hey, the investigation's been ongoing. They've been working around the clock, but we don't have answers yet. Secretary Long was asked whether he thought this was the work of an enemy. So again, going straight to this case's Secretary of the Navy. He replied, quote, I do not. I am influenced by the fact that Captain Sigsbee has not yet reported to the Navy Department. He's the one who's in charge of the investigation. It seems he is waiting to write a full report. So in other words, he wants to get everything right before he sends in his report. So he's willing to be patient. And perhaps this newspaper is willing to be a little bit more patient. So long as he has not made a decision, I certainly cannot. I should think from the signs, however, that there was an accident, that the magazine exploded. Again, the magazine is where those ammunitions are stored on a ship. How that came about, I do not know. So he's being really honest here. He doesn't know. From the present, at least, no other warship will be sent to Havana. End quote. Captain Sully, who knows a great deal about warships, did not entertain the idea that the Maine had been destroyed on purpose. He said that fires sometimes start in the coal bunkers, and he told of such a fire on board another warship that started very close to the magazine. The fire became so hot that the heat blistered the steel wall between the fire and the ammunition before the bunkers and magazines were flooded with water to stop the fire. He did not believe that the Spanish or Cubans in Havana had either the information or the equipment necessary to blow up the magazine, while the Maine was under guard. So again, you see a very different approach, one that's more based in multiple experts. So they didn't rely on just one person like Teddy Roosevelt here, who we know was sort of itching for a fight. He'd been very bored in the Navy. And certainly, or I should say as the assistant secretary of the Navy. And then in this case, they're going straight to the Department of the Navy. They mentioned to another captain who talks about similar situations. So there's a lot of specific evidence in here that they're saying, hey, this could very easily be an accident. We're not going to assume that this was the Spanish. And they talk about the need to be patient for the full picture. Certainly when he talks in this portion here about, needing to wait until the full report was written. So you can see two vastly different approaches here. One more based in sensationalism, one waiting to try to get all the facts and at least reporting what is really known at the moment. So again, take a moment, organize the information in here, and who do you think has the best evidence? I hope this helps. I hope it helps you kind of dissect it a little bit, especially for my students. For those of you who are just listening, just want to say thank you. I hope you learned something. I hope it maybe piques your interest to want to jump into this, and maybe it sparks you to better understand the Spanish-American War as a whole, or this time period of kind of this developing American urban society sort of towards the turn of the century into the 1900s, so into the 20th century. I want to thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History.